Hello, dear friends, old and new. Welcome to the Business of Personal Brand Photography. My name is Paula Brennan, and I'm really honored that you've decided to join me today, whether you're joining me from across the pond or from Australia. I'm really excited that you've chosen to spend some time listening to little old me. Now, if you've been listening to this for a while, you would have heard me talk a lot about some different influences that have been in my career. But really, what I wanted to do is talk about the most meaningful influences and why. After 23 years in this industry, I want to be really honest with you, I've had so many different mentors and coaches and photographers that have inspired and influenced me in different ways. But when I sort of distilled it down and thought about it, there's really three key people or mentors that have really shaped the way that I see myself as an artist, that have shaped the way that I operate in business, and that have shaped my career as a whole. And so, what I wanted to do was share with you today who these amazing three people are, but more so I wanted to share with you the lessons that they've taught me, just in a way. If you haven't been lucky enough to be mentored by another photographer or had an influence of another photographer sort of in your direct line of vision, you can sometimes miss that front seat action that happens and the little things that happen behind the scenes. So I wanted to share with you some of the things that I've learned in the hope that you might in fact learn something too or be positively influenced in some way. So for those of you who have been following me for a while, you will know that I grew up in a household that was a photography studio. So underneath my house, we had a studio, and up above on the top level is where we lived. But I did have to go down through the studio in order to be able to get to the pool or get to the laundry and things like that. So I was often, as a kid, walking through, where my dad was with people. So my first influence, I have to say, is my good old dad, Bazza. Barry. My dad was not a photographer by trade. He trained as an accountant and came over from Ireland. And in the 80s, when a lot of people in our street were losing their jobs, my dad decided very bravely to start a photography business and follow his passion. And so, yes, as a kid, I did grow up doing things like stamping photos and things like that. But learning from my dad was exceptional, and I am so grateful for the experience that I had. Now, I thought when I was growing up, particularly as a teenager, that photography would be the furthest thing that I would do. I just ran really hard from it. I ran overseas, studied acting, did everything but when I came back to Australia in 1999, sounds like so long ago now, but I decided that I wanted to join the business and, learn photography. And it was right about now that I started to really learn from my dad. So obviously the first thing my dad taught me to do was to shoot. He taught me everything that he kind of understood to be able to teach about photography. So he was teaching me aperture, shutter speed, and all of those kind of things. Now, I'm going to be really honest with you. A lot of it at the time was going over my head when he was teaching me the structural stuff like that. But what he did teach me, and he was a really good teacher as this, was he taught me to be able to see light. Now, if you're a new photographer, this perhaps might sound like a far concept for you, but once you see light and you can sort of read light, I guess, it's something that you can't unsee. Beautiful light, key lighting, understanding where it's coming from, knowing how to use it and manipulate it. That to me was such a pivotal skill. And I remember being really frustrated at times because he'd be sort of showing me things and I couldn't recreate or I couldn't see it necessarily how he was seeing it. But he kept persevering with me until I was able to fully read light or see light. And so I think not only did that obviously enhanced me as a photographer, but it just made me a greater appreciation for the world as a whole. And I've got to get a little bit emotional with this, but being able to sort of watch a movie and really appreciate the lighting, to be able to sit and understand what the light's doing during a sunset or a sunrise, and being able to sort of manipulate the light when you're on a photo shoot, like that's just like a pure gift that I'm so grateful that he imparted on me. So so that was a huge thing for me when, the first couple of years is kind of learning how to read and see light like that. Now, The second thing that my dad showed me really well is that he showed me by example how to be with people and how to be great with people, I'm going to say. He was a fantastic people person. He is still, I'm not saying it, he's still with me, thank God, today, but he is a really charismatic Irishman. You know, everyone loves the Irish, but particularly my dad was really, really beautiful and patient and kind with people. And he taught me like incredible people skills, how to get people to do what you want without having to touch them, how to guide people, how to get them involved and how to bring them along emotionally. All of those beautiful things those interpersonal skills that you need if you're going to be a capturer, a photographer of people. He taught me that. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's not something that he necessarily indicatively said out loud. It was just by observing and watching him. And I'll tell you, one of the greatest lessons that I had was very early on in my career. My dad was very good friends with a lot of photographers. So he sent me out to do photo shoots with other photographers. And I got a massive shock when I saw how some of them were behaving around people. A lot of the really, really amazing photographers, and I'm going to, hands down, beautiful artists, but their people skills sometimes was quite appalling and quite poor. I saw photographers getting frustrated with clients because they couldn't communicate what they wanted. I saw them taking out their interpersonal stuff, whatever was happening at home. I saw them bringing that to the photo shoot. And those sorts of things I'd never seen my dad do. Now, my brother's got cerebral palsy. I was a bit of a nightmare of a teenager. And I know that during that time, my dad turned up as like amazing for his clients. And there was absolutely no time when he would have brought what was happening at home into his workplace. And so that was a huge skill for me to learn as well, is leave your problems at the door, particularly when you're doing something like weddings or portraits or personal branding. This is kind of like sometimes a once in a lifetime experience, or for your business clients, it can be a really massive investment for them. So you need to make sure that you show up, right? And that you show up with 100% full energy, no matter what's going on at home. Yeah. So I think that was an amazing thing that he taught me, was to kind of leave my problems at home. And he never said it to me out loud. I have to say this. He never once said it to me out loud. The only thing that he ever communicated with me about this is he told me once, he said, "It's a bride's day, never try to upstage her." And I got that on so many levels. Being young, pretty 20-something when I was sort of, starting out, I really got what he was saying with that. And so, obviously I translated that into what I wore and the kind of makeup that I put on and things like that. But more so I want to say is that what he taught me was never said out loud. It was just solely by being an amazing person on the photo shoots, energetically focused, giving everything 100% and doing it with pure joy. And to this day, I see how much joy my dad still gets. He's retired now, but I still see how much joy he gets out of making people feel good when they're standing in front of his lens. It's just a gift. It's a gift that he has, and thank God it's a gift that he was able to impart on me. Now, the other thing that my dad sort of imparted on me was that he was really great at selling. He was a really good salesperson, but it didn't feel like selling, okay? He just had this way to always meet people's needs and then show them what they didn't even know that they wanted. So he was just presenting it for them. And then he was allowing the process to happen after that. So I never heard my dad do anything like a hard close. I never heard him putting pressure on. He just always made it easy for his clients to say yes in the sales sessions. And watching him at his craft, again, nothing was ever said out loud, but watching him do the magic of just showing people what they wanted and putting it out there for them, and then allowing them the time and the space to say yes. He was a master at being quiet in the sales room at the right time. I just have to say that. It was so good. He didn't fluster or futter or anything like that. And I think, similar to me now, he wasn't hung up on the final outcome. He was always just happy that people landed where they wanted to. or they were comfortable with, without being pushed into it or any sort of tacky sales tactics. So that there was so much more I could tell you about what I learned from my dad. But when I tried to distill it down, those were the three main things: teaching me how to see light, or showing me how to shoot, showing me how to be with people, the people interpersonal skills, and also how to be a service style salesperson rather than necessarily be like a pushy salesperson. So forever grateful, Dad, if you're listening, thank you. Now, the second person who's been a huge influence on my career is the beautiful Sue Bryce. Now, you guys know I've talked about her a lot before. If you've never found or discovered Sue Bryce, where have you been? But she was hugely instrumental. And I'm going to say to you that it's probably not in ways that you would necessarily think. So I was lucky enough to meet Sue before she sort of had a massive world stage. She was in Sydney, and I was lucky enough to be photographed by her. Now, that single experience not only changed my vision, my whole way that I see myself as a woman, but it also changed the way that I saw my craft. I saw that Sue was able to empower women with such like essence and such femininity, and it really changed the trajectory of my career. So at the time, I was a wedding photographer, probably overworking, saying yes to too many different things. And when I saw what Sue was doing, I immediately had a knee-jerk reaction and started shifting my business, traveling in the direction of the portrait studio model. And so, in terms of influence, that was a huge fork in the road for me. And it was also something that, having Sue as an example of a person who had achieved that and done that and created that studio model, I knew that it was achievable for me. Seeing her go before me, seeing that model work for her, and seeing the kind of sales that she could have and the kind of business that she had created, I knew that it was possible. So even though at the time when I was sort of taking the little bit of a turn in my trajectory, when a lot of the naysayers around me, the people who just wanted to protect me and keep me safe, were really concerned about me like throwing away weddings and jumping ship into portraits, I knew that it was possible because she had done it before me. So in a lot of ways, she shaped the direction, that kind of, the fork in the road. She helped me to choose that fork, and I'm forever grateful to her for that. Now, Sue taught me, because I was lucky enough to sort of be alongside of her, she taught me so many lessons, and trying to distill this down was really difficult for me. But when there's lots of things, and if you've done any of her training, you'll know there's so many things that she kind of repeats over and over. But one of the most beneficial things she ever said to me, and she said it like 3 times in a row, it was when she came to see my studio. And I had this, what I thought was an amazing studio set up at the time, and I had lots of little photos, and I had big photos on the wall, and I had all these little albums to display stuff and everything like that. And she walked into my studio and she said to me, "Paula, a confused mind says no." And she just was silent. And I was like, okay, what? Right, whatever. She goes, "No, a confused mind says no." And she just looked around and she said, "Right now I'm feeling really overwhelmed." And it took me a little bit of a while to get to know it and understand what she was saying. But my space was very overwhelming. There was too many pictures. I was trying to be too many things to everybody. There was too many different products to choose from. There was too much. And so that voice, that Sue Bryce voice, kept playing over and over in my head. And I went through and I basically stripped out so much stuff out of my business at the time. And I've been very conscious of trying to do this since that day, is when I'm doing my packaging and pricing, when I'm, sending emails, when I'm showing people displays, when I'm giving people options to choose from in my business, I need to make it really, really simple and really easy for them to say yes. So remember that, guys, if you haven't already sort of done this flush through of your business, a confused one says no. So please try not to overwhelm your clients. And that was something that really changed everything for me, because my pricing, my product range, everything became so much simpler. it was easier for me too. So it reduced a lot of the overwhelm that I was feeling at the time, and it allowed me to just give simple options for my clients, and it allowed them to just choose from simple things. And now it's really funny because I now get overwhelmed if I go into shops that have got too many racks. It's like, now that I've decluttered my business life, I've decluttered a lot of my life after that. And I find, going to restaurants that only have simplified menus, I find that a lot easier to choose than if you give me 100 things to choose from. So Sue Bryce is still speaking inside of my head. Now, the other way that I feel that Sue has really strongly influenced my world, and I touched on it a little bit before, but I want to touch on something a little bit different about it, is that I watched Sue. I didn't necessarily see her with inner demons, but I knew that she had come from a place where she had struggled a lot in herself personally. And she shares openly about this within her teachings, and in order to be able to help other people. But I watched her like literally catapult up onto a world stage, and more so I saw her decide what she wanted for her life and go unrelentlessly for it. And that doesn't mean that she was nasty or anything in that way. When I say unrelentless, it means that she believed that she could have it and she went after it. Now, if you have listened to her talk, a lot of the time she'll say, well, I'm just a girl from, she comes from a place called Karaka in New Zealand. That's in my head, but it might not be. But that's where she came from, a small town in New Zealand. And then within a few short years, she was one of the premier leading educators in our industry. And I know that she just set her targets on that and she made it happen. And I tell you what the influence on me had is that if she can put away her inner demons, I know it's possible for me. And watching her be able to build that career where she has literally touched hundreds of thousands of lives. I think if she hadn't taken that step, if she hadn't had that belief, how many people would miss out on all of the amazing inspiration, careers, opportunities, life changes? How many people would have missed out on all of that if she had let any inhibitions, not even some inhibitions, her fears take hold and stop her from going after what she wanted? So I think in so many ways, her influence on me, and probably on so many others, and you, I'm sure as well, is that she has given me the belief that I can put aside, and I have since I've met her, put aside a lot of the things that were going on and swirling around in here, in my head, and perhaps the things that were holding me back, and helped me to suspend those so I can go after what I wanted and create the life that I wanted. And so that, to me, again, I don't even know how to like quantify that, because it's just such an immense impact that she's had on my life in that respect. I could go fan over her for days. Now, someone who I have actually girl fanned over is my last key mentor influence that I wanted to share with you today. And she doesn't know me personally, but I have met her before. And if you haven't come across her, she's just a beautiful educator. Her name is Amy Porterfield. So Amy Porterfield is an online marketer. She's an online marketing educator, I guess you would call her. She's a course creator and she teaches other people how to create courses. So like I said, I have girl fanned on her. I went and saw her speak at an event, and I stood outside and got a little bit flustery when I got a photo with her, which is kind of funny because I don't normally do that over people, but she kind of, I think because I'd been listening to her podcast for years, when I finally stood next to her, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So I'm going to say, I don't know when she first came into my world. I'm going to say it was probably like 7 or 8 years ago, maybe. I sort of like was knocking around with a few online educators, online marketing educators in particular, and I happened to come across her podcast. So I spent a lot of time consuming her content in order to learn how to become a better marketer and learn how to harness online marketing. And she was instrumental in my business growth when I first started my studio, and over the last, sort of, 5+ years, she has been instrumental in me helping to become a better marketer. And so I'm so appreciative of that with her. But probably what I would really pinpoint as one of the major things that she's taught me is that she's actually taught me how to become a better teacher. Now, when I was a little girl at school, I always thought that I would become a teacher. I know it sounds weird, but it was one of those things. I wanted to become an actress when I was a teenager, but when I was younger, I was always running classes and being a bit bossy. And I have to say that the way that Amy structures her teaching and the effort that she puts into research before she records a podcast or does a call or does something or creates a course, the way that she structures her teaching and breaks down her teaching into step-by-step methods that makes it super easy for people to consume, that has been a massive influence on me becoming now a teacher or an educator within the photography profession. And I have to say that I've learned so much on how to make things easy and bite-sized chunk for people to consume, and I've definitely applied that within my program as well. And I have to say that she helped me and gave me the courage to actually take all of my years of experience and step into creating a program to teach other photographers. Because, doing that, and I'm talking, a couple of years ago, it's become a lot more popular and there's a lot more people out there teaching it now. But about 4 years ago, I think I bought a program from her and I worked my way through the program to create one of my first courses. And now I've obviously got Breakthrough, which is my signature program. But being able to follow a guide who I really appreciated their style of education and being able to apply what she taught me and sort of put it into practice, that has been hugely influential in my career over the last couple of years in order to be able to share what I've learned and to be able to have influence on other photographers. So it's kind of like this magic sort of synergy that I've been able to create with all of these mentors. Hey, so my dad's obviously taught me the craft. Sue helped me to see a different way and gave me sort of a perspective of how high you can climb. And Amy Porterfield's taught me and given me the grounding to become a great educator. And hopefully I get to share what I've learned with so many more people, but it's given me the courage to even just start this podcast and feel like I've got a voice that people might enjoy listening to and enjoy learning from. So yeah, I'm pretty grateful to all three of them. Now, these three are my teachers. They're my mentors. And if you haven't had, been lucky enough to have a mentor in your life, I hope that maybe this might encourage you to reach out and look for someone who can be a teacher for you and be a guide, who can give you some direction, support, and maybe even prop you up when you need it, because God knows when you run a business, you do need all the support you can get. And doing it alone isn't always the way forward. I know that it can seem sometimes like it might be the logical way to do it, but definitely these three people have shown me a path and then given me the way, and I've gone and followed and then obviously found my own direction within that. But I think if you can find a mentor, a guide, whatever it is, and it's someone who's done what you want to do before you, I think it's so impactful in your journey, no matter what business you're in, but particularly as a photographer, because, having someone who's trod the path and can help you to have little quick fixes or little, how-tos and up to the big stuff, learning things like sales techniques and marketing techniques. I think it's a really valuable investment for yourself in your business and in yourself as a person, as growing as a human. All right, my friends, I hope that this has helped you. And if you are keen or interested and maybe you might want to be guided or mentored by me, as time of recording or the time that you'll be listening to this episode, the doors are about to open on my program, my signature program, Breakthrough, that 3-month program. So if you're interested, make sure that you jump into the show notes or go to paulabrennan.com.au/breakthrough and you could find out how I could become a mentor in your life. That's it for today, my friends, and I'll look forward to connecting with you next time.
So salty, I'll still think about it.
We can take my Lambo, I'll put on a tight show.